My wife cheated with my college friend, until I exposed their secret and watched their world burn down in front of everyone they knew. My wife cheated with my college friend, so I ensured their reputations were destroyed. I think the best way for me to explain the situation is to start from the beginning, which takes us back to when I was in college. My roommate was a guy called Brian, and he ended up being a super cool guy. In fact, we hit it off almost immediately, and he's still a fantastic friend of mine to this day. I wouldn't say he's my best friend, but he's certainly in the top 3. We used to do everything college boys did: go to parties, drink, smoke weed, and pick up girls. We were both rather good with women, if I do say so myself. By the time we were in our junior year, I met a senior girl that we'll just call Andrea for the sake of this story. I mean, I had my way with women, and I know this will sound corny to a lot of you, but it didn't take long for me to start wondering whether I was in love with Andrea. We hung out a lot. She was pretty, she was interesting to talk to, and she gave me a person to talk to about non-fret-like things. Andrea and I started dating, and that basically took me out of the womanizing scene that I was in with Brian. He was a bit bummed, but I still played wingman when we went out. When he met Andrea, he understood. After that, he stopped trying to push me to pick up girls and respected our relationship, which made me respect him more. Remember, we were young and stupid, so it would have been so easy for him to egg me on with "she'll never know" and the like. Anyway, Andrea graduated first, then me, and we dated for years. We finally got married when it felt like the time was right. Honestly, it was the happiest day of my life. I guess it is for a lot of people, at least until you have your first kid. Our marriage has been relatively smooth and clean. We're not ready for children yet, as we're still trying to get our lives in perfect order before then, and things are going great in that regard. Andrea has an online business that sells all sorts of wholesome and inspirational merch for women, and it does pretty well. I work as an auto mechanic, though I'm aiming to get my own shop soon, and I'm close to having what I need. I think that's the necessary background to understand why I'm writing this in the first place. Brian comes around to visit me now and again. I mean, he's one of my best friends and only one of the 2 who lives really close by. He told me that he'd be coming to visit me that evening, and I gave him a time when I'd be back. Unfortunately for me, on the way back home, I had a flat tire and had to replace it on the side of the road. I was tired after the day I had, but I managed to put the spare on as fast as I could. I did get caught in after work traffic, though, but thankfully not for too long. I think the whole thing must have cost me like 30 to 40 minutes. It was while I was changing the tire that Brian had called me to tell me he had gotten to my place. He messaged again right as I hit the traffic. I let him know the situation and headed home. Now, here's where the problem comes in, and it's where I need to know all of your thoughts. I pulled into our parking spot, and since I drive an M2 that I've done quite a bit of work on, it's easy to hear when I've gotten back home. Now, I've been replaying this over and over in my head. I think it must have taken me about 90 seconds from parking to getting back into the apartment. When I opened the door, I saw Brian and my wife in the living room, but things seemed odd. This wasn't the first time that the 2 of them had been left at home alone, but it was probably the first time they had been alone for so long without me. Usually, it would be like 10 minutes tops. Here's the thing, Andrea welcomed me like she always does, and Brian seemed cool, but there was just something off. Andrea seemed a lot more disheveled than Brian. Her hair was slightly messed up, just slightly, but enough that I could notice it. I mean, that alone isn't what's making me suspicious, but honestly, I just have a gut feeling. I don't know. I feel like something might have happened, but there's really no precedent for me to believe that. Well, to be fair, Brian is a cheater. The guy is married and has been cheating on his wife for a long time. I don't tolerate it, and I've tried to return the favor he did for me back in college by trying my best to keep him faithful, but at the end of the day, he does what he wants. The first few times, he was remorseful, but now he seems to just enjoy it without any regrets. Before you all judge me, I'm not a fan of being friends with this version of Brian. Anytime we go out and he starts talking about women that he sees around, I get pissed off, but otherwise, he's still the same great guy I've known since college, so I can't just cut him off as a friend. Honestly, it's a lot harder to do than you'd think. But with Brian, as much as he is a cheater, I imagine I know at least 10 cases where he's cheated on his wife over the last 4 years. Some people have always seemed off limits. He's talked nasty about his sister-in-law but always gives a disclaimer that he'd never do anything with her. I mean, he's never talked that way about Andrea, but I'd make the very obvious assumption that she's off limits too. Again, he's known her since our college days, and this is one of my closest friends. I keep doing all sorts of mental gymnastics, wondering whether something happened between them or not, and I really can't tell. I don't think Andrea would allow it. I don't think Brian would either, even if the other was interested, but for both of these people who I imagine to be loyal, Giving in to temptation seems improbable. Anyway, I really want to hear other people's thoughts on this because I've been unable to talk to anyone I know about it. It just seems so embarrassing. Again, I walked in, they seemed to be acting odd, and my wife's hair seemed a little messier than usual. I've known her for a long time, so I could tell that something was off, but I don't know what. I've never seen both of them like that. Saying it back now, it could be a million things that aren't them getting intimate, but again, I really need a second opinion. Thanks, everyone. Edit. I saw a lot of comments saying that there's nothing substantial to go on, and I agree, though there is a gut feeling, and I've learned to trust those over the years. Reading all the stories here can make it seem like everyone is always cheating, which is fair, but there was a good point made that it's better for me to be safe than sorry, and nothing should stop me from trying to get to the bottom of things, even if it means going through her phone. So, I think that's what I'm going to try to do. I really hope I find nothing, though that won't confirm that nothing happened. Honestly, if it bothers me way too much, I'll just ask her straight up. She's always been honest with me, as far as I know. Let's break it down. You've got Brian, the not-so-great role model for marital fidelity, and Andrea, your wife, who's apparently into selling wholesome merchandise but maybe not practicing wholesomeness herself. Now, I'm no detective, but if this were a movie, it would be titled The Suspicious Hairdo. You walk in, your wife's hair looks like it just had a WrestleMania match with a tornado, and Brian's there like he's auditioning for the role of innocent bystander number 1. I feel like Brian had her in more than just a half Nelson. Yeah, that's something that typically doesn't happen in people's experiences here, so I had no idea how to react. She told me that while they were waiting for me in the living room, Brian asked her for a beer and went to the fridge to get it for himself. When he came back to sit down, he sat beside her and started talking about the college days. She says he put his arm around her while talking about this and started saying how he'd always thought she was pretty and hated that he never got a chance to show her that. According to her, he started getting really touchy with her at that point, saying all the things he'd like to do to her if she gave him the chance. She said she was quiet for the most part, and he went in for a kiss, and she returned it. They basically full-on made out. His hand went under the t-shirt she was wearing, but she claims that was the extent of it. Considering she was confessing, I couldn't help but feel like she might have left out details that made her more culpable. I had no clue how to react after hearing that. Like, how do you actually react after a confession like that? What do you do? She obviously felt crappy enough about it, and she didn't take long to come out with it, but that certainly doesn't do anything to make her less of a cheater, does it? There was a sense of relief to have that confirmation because I felt like I was going crazy with overthinking before, but I really had no clue what to do. What do people do when a cheating partner confesses instead of being found out? Are you meant to be more merciful? I had to leave the house and go sleep somewhere else because I really couldn't put my thoughts together, and it was unhealthy for us to be in the same place at that point. The next day, I considered going back home to talk, but I decided to confront Brian. Maybe she had already told him that she had come clean, but I needed to talk to him and find out what was true and what wasn't. I've known him longer than her, but I also knew enough about him to know that he was a chronic cheater, and that just made me not want to give him the benefit of the doubt. I called him up to meet at the bar we liked, and he didn't seem off when I told him. We got there, ordered drinks, and when they arrived, I sprung the question on him. I asked him straight up what happened between him and my wife that day. I actually saw him freeze when I asked that. The first thing he did was apologize for betraying me, and then he went into the whole story, but it was a little different from what Andrea told me. According to Brian, he got there, and they spoke a little bit. He said it was the usual small talk, but then she came to sit beside him and started touching him up, slightly at first, then a lot more deliberately. Soon after, they confirmed I was still stuck in traffic. According to him, he asked where I was the second time that night because he was trying to avoid anything happening between them. But you know how I am, man, was his justification for eventually giving in to my wife's seduction. I mean, at least he confirmed that it was just making out and feeling up and nothing more. Honestly, though, I couldn't stand to be around him at that point, and I really didn't care whose story was true and whose was false because it just seemed like two people each trying to cover their butts. At the end of the day, the only thing I knew for sure was that they made out. One of my good friends betrayed me, and my wife cheated on me, and no matter how much their stories tried to confuse me, that was the bottom line. All I did was express how disappointed I was in him, especially considering how long we had known each other. Then I left and went back to the place I was staying. This happened yesterday, so I now know that two of the closest people to me have screwed me over, and I don't know how to feel. My wife confessed, but I don't think that means anything. It doesn't change the fact that she cheated on me with one of my best friends. The only silver lining to this whole thing is that I'm finding out I can't trust this woman only about 2 years into our marriage. Some people go decades before this kind of moment. In the morning, I'm going to call a divorce lawyer to set things up because I honestly don't think there's any other outcome for this. Forgiveness has crossed my mind, but it's the love I have for Andrea that's pushing me to find some way to make things work, but I can't, can I? I just know I'm going to resent her. I already do. I'll give you all an update when something changes, but for now, I'll just fall asleep with the help of some cheap booze. See y'all later. Ah, yes, there it is. So, your wife decides to spill the beans on her little makeout session with Brian, huh? And Brian, oh, good old Brian, tries to spin it like your wife was the seductive siren luring him into the rocky shores of infidelity. At least they're both on the same page about one thing. They're both expert-level backstabbers. And what's your next move? Divorce? Yep, that seems like a pretty reasonable response. The last thing I told all of you was about how I was already getting ready to find a divorce lawyer. And just like I said, the next day, one of my other friends, who I was sure I could actually trust a lot more, gave me the number of a good friend of his who was a divorce lawyer. I called her up and arranged an appointment to meet her at her firm. She sounded like she knew her stuff, to be honest, and I'm rather clueless when it comes to the intricacies of divorces because very few people close to me have divorced. She explained everything well, and I made sure to pay her retainer within the week. Considering I was going to have a lot of legal expenses to deal with, I went back home. It's not like I had gone completely incognito on Andrea, but I hadn't been very talkative with her over the phone. She was happy to see me back at home, probably thinking this was the first sign of things getting back to normal. I didn't make intentional efforts to make her feel that way, but neither did I dissuade her. She kept trying to act normal and make jokes, but I was pretty stone-faced through the whole thing. She came to the living room one night when I was sleeping on the couch and apologized for the whole thing all over again, and I just nodded when she was done. She sat there for a while before going back to the bedroom. Once the papers had been prepared by the lawyer, I served them to Andrea right away. She looked so surprised, which was stupid to me because I didn't think divorce was too irrational a conclusion for someone who cheated on their spouse with a best friend. She kept asking over and over whether I was serious or joking, but honestly, each time she asked, I just got more pissed looking at her. I said nothing in response beyond I want a divorce. What really set me off was when she said, I confessed. I said I was sorry. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I was so close to losing my temper at that point. I had to remind her that she and my friend from college had both betrayed me, and as much as she felt like her confession had changed anything, it hadn't. As much as they hadn't gone all the way, that didn't change anything either. Honestly, I was so pissed off at the silly excuses she was making, and what sent me for the door was when she said, I wish I hadn't said anything, with tears pouring down her cheeks. Basically, she would have preferred for me to be an ignorant fool who would still hang out with his sleazeball best friend and still sleep beside his cheating wife. No, thanks. I left the house again because I was scared I'd do something to her. She said the wrong thing again. The whole divorce process started sometime later, and to be honest, things looked pretty well stacked in my favor. I mean, I've been trying to get my own shop started up, and while I was a bit sad that things weren't going as fast as I wanted, it was probably for the best. My wife was still the breadwinner with her business, and it seemed like I was going to end up with some degree of alimony if my lawyer could pull it off, especially because my wife was a cheating witch, and I had chat records from immediately after she confessed, full of her apologizing for what she had done. I was going to let the law do its thing, but was I also going to let Brian get away with his part in the whole thing? It didn't really matter who seduced him because, at the end of the day, they were both into it. Nobody forced anyone else, and to me, cheating isn't a mistake. It's not like accidentally putting salami in your sandwich instead of pastrami or something. Both of them knew what they were doing was wrong, but they had the self-control of animals and couldn't keep their hands to themselves. I will confess that I felt like a horrible guy doing this, but I called up Brian's wife and told her everything about her husband and his cheating, including with Andrea. Honestly, I don't know whether she had no idea or just didn't know the full extent of it, but she actually started crying over the phone. She asked why I didn't tell her sooner, but the only thing I could say was that I didn't know how it felt until now. She eventually thanked me, and I spent the rest of the day wondering if that was the right thing to do. It made me wonder if I'd have wanted to stay ignorant, but I realized the answer to that was no, and I hope it was the same for her. Anyway, it was only about 3 hours later that I got an extremely long text message from Brian, full of expletives, and honestly, I just laughed at it because it wasn't a problem when he made out with Andrea, and it wasn't a problem when he slept with countless other women, but the consequence of his actions, that's what he couldn't handle. I really don't think being faithful is super tough. I didn't reply to his message because there was nothing to say to it, and the only things I could think of would have just riled him up more. I was getting the last laugh, clearly. Spoiler alert, a few weeks ago, his wife moved out. As for Andrea, the divorce proceedings were relatively tame. I think it was because she actually knew she messed up, and there was a lot against her. The fact that there was evidence pointing to her cheating put her at a disadvantage. Her lawyer seemed disappointed that she owned up to it. I guess she had advised her to deny it entirely. There was a pretty sizable gap in our income, so I ended up being entitled to alimony. Honestly, I didn't need it because I could get by on my own, but I still took it anyway because I really didn't want to lose out on any opportunities to hit back at her. The apartment was probably the messiest part of the whole thing because neither of us was willing to move out. I mean, it was rented, and rent was going to be due in a few months, so it wouldn't hurt too much if I didn't get it, but again, I wasn't trying to make things easy for her. I did eventually let the house go because we live in a community property state, and her snake of a lawyer tried to bring my car to the splitting table, which I certainly wasn't about to entertain. Unfortunately for her, losing the apartment didn't exactly make me feel more hospitable toward her. The divorce was finalized, and I had to do the only thing I had left to do. I called her parents, I called her siblings, and I called a few other relatives to let them all know that Andrea and I were parting ways because she was a cheater who almost slept with my best friend. I preferred putting it that way since they likely would have had I not come sooner. Naturally, they were shocked, and a lot of them tried to get me to rethink things, but I let them know that it was final, and that was that. I also wrote a post on Facebook, tagging her and letting everyone know that we were no longer together. I didn't lay out all the details. Honestly, I don't know why I held back, but I did make it clear that she had cheated on me. She runs an online business and makes clothes with all sorts of inspirational jargon for young women, and I hope that my post will naturally reach the right people and get amplified. The 5 people who potentially see her as a role model might need a reality check to know she's not the wholesome woman they think she is. At this point, my post got a little traction, but as far as I know, it hasn't blown up beyond at least 2 TikTok videos I saw. Maybe it will blow up some more, maybe it won't, but I've done what I can, and I'm fine with it. Look, fellas, whether she confesses or not means nothing. Cheating isn't a mistake, and it's something that deserves to be punished because emotional pain might be the only way a cheater can learn. That's what I think. Maybe the next person she ends up with will be luckier. I'm smiling right now because just a few days after this, my ex-wife called me, crying and begging me to take down my Facebook post. Supposedly, she had gotten a few DMs on her business Instagram account asking whether what I said was true. Apparently, her TikTok comment section had one person break the news, asking whether it was true or not, and that's how the whole thing spiraled out of control. I don't think her business will die because of this, but it's hurt her reputation, at least in front of a few hundred people at the very least, and that's fine by me. Maybe I'll make my own TikTok account and have some fun with the whole thing. I'm glad that I was able to get my satisfaction out of such an unfortunate situation. First, you hit her with those divorce papers like a legal wrecking ball. Then, you spill the beans to her family and friends faster than a gossiping grandma at bingo night. And let's not forget the Facebook post outing her as the cheating scoundrel she is. Bravo. But the real icing on the cake, her business takes a hit, thanks to your little social media bombshell. Ah, sweet, sweet revenge, served cold and with a side of internet infamy. And the fact that you're considering joining TikTok just to keep the drama train rolling? Priceless. Who needs therapy when you've got a divorce, a vendetta, and a knack for social media warfare? You are the hero we never knew we needed in the world of relationship drama. What do you make of all this?